he may want a weaker dollar, and he will get a weaker dollar relative to gold and Bitcoin, but he's not going to get it against his trading partners.
Welcome back to Metals and Miners. I'm its founder and its host, Gary Bohm. Today we have an awesome discussion lined up. We're fortunate to have with us Thomas George. Thomas has over 17 years of global institutional investment management experience. He's currently the president of Grizzle, which is focused on strategy, commodities, and growth. He's a CFA charter holder and has been featured on Fox Business, CNBC, Bloomberg, and many other outlets. He's the co-founder of the Substack Grizzle Research and Quant, a macro commodities and growth-focused newsletter. Thomas, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Gary, thank you so much. Thank you for the intro. Thank you.
Okay, well, let's begin with a look back on 2024. From an economic and market perspective, what surprised and shocked you? What fell right in line with expectations? And what are you expecting moving into 2025?
Yeah, good question. So what felt good? I have to say we were long tech, and that really worked out for us, specifically AI, NVIDIA being our top holding. So on the tech side, we feel, it just really felt good and everything worked. So that makes a predominant part of our portfolio, right? So we have an ETF, Grizzle Growth ETF. The ticker's DARP, DARP. But so the view here is disruption at a reasonable price. How do we think about it? We think about it in two views. That it's the traditional technology view of as people think about disruption. AI is the meat and potatoes there for us. But on the flip side is we feel that commodities are definitively a part of that disruption, but they don't get love, right? And thereby there's the value. I would say this year has been the sector that really worked for us well was natural gas, and again, our natural gas names. I'm not talking NVIDIA type returns, but solid. You're in the 17-20% category. Very happy with that. I would say if we didn't, we had a couple of uranium names. One got taken out, so that actually was fantastic. So we're thankful for that. But I would say, as a whole, I don't think uranium investors are thrilled with all that's transpired this year and looking at where the uranium equities are as a whole. That's now we're looking at redeploying the capital from the takeout, and it's tough because we need to see these things move. And again, I would say that's you couldn't have the stars align better than this, right? Russia, you've got everything that should be. We've got a renaissance. Trump in, it's all great. But these stocks still, it still struggles. Now that's uranium. Even more depressing is gold equities, right? And so that I would say, we're growth investors. So by definition, we're not owning the Newmonts of the world. We're not owning the Barricks. And I know those two have disappointed investors. We are big fans of Agnico, but that's just kind of that's a big stock, and obviously very, very well run, but I wouldn't put it in the growth category, and it doesn't really fit ours. But the small mid cap space has been nothing short of it's been sad. Needless, that we do believe that there is really just this underlying value there has to come through, and it's a huge opportunity. And I'll get into some of the aspects on why, because I think, Gary, that's a really important question. I think investors, we're going to be putting out a piece in December, and maybe I'll touch base with you when we put that one out. But I think there's an important story here in mining particularly, and it's just what the role that these large cap ETFs like GDX play, right? Very negative role for mining investors. But again, I think there's these things do have a way of with the right catalyst can work out. But again, gold equities, and then on the flip side, very happy with copper. I think copper. If you were to look at just the broad mix and say, okay, well, here's unloved oil, here's unloved. Like, again, copper should trade like oil. Like, let's be frank, right? Both are economic expansion. But the reality is, I think oil investors have a tough time digesting as well. Is that when Saudi takes capacity offline, that means that's spare capacity, right? We don't have to manage the copper market. Like, there's nobody stuffing away copper saying, I'm going to tighten this market up. And I think that really is the story that listen, I got a lot of good friends that are oil bulls, and I do believe functionally that hydrocarbon is God's gift. And we run the world on it. But the reality is that having a party like Saudi and OPEC as a whole, it obviously can be great during the good times, but when demand slackens, and we've seen that come out of China, that again, this wouldn't be an issue if China wasn't effectively slowing down their consumption of oil. I'm not going to say that it's as a whole. They've been very, very strategic, all to the benefit of copper, in building out their EV penetration, right? And that's both at the two levels, right? That's both at a consumer level, cars on the road, plus at an industrial level, right? Like they're incorporating this in a deep way. They have the deep pockets to do it and the strategic wherewithal to think 10, 20 years down the road. And so I think you get these air pockets in oil where the Saudi capacity. So now they're like, well, they're tightening the market. Well, wait a minute. As soon as demand rolls off, now they're not tightening the market. Now that's new supply ready to hit the market, right? So my good friend Warren Pies, he's great at kind of articulating that very well. But it's a nuance, and I think it's one of those where you do struggle to find, in my view, more balanced opinions on oil. And so that's one thing, but again, not to digress. The point here is that oil and copper should be generally moving together. If it's a bad year for oil, typically it'll be a bad year for copper. It wasn't a bad year for copper. More importantly, what it showed you is just how tight this market is. We don't need an OPEC. We don't need, we don't need a Saudi holding back inventory. This market is every pound is accounted for, and we want more pounds. And I'll be honest, right? Like if you're India, if you're Brazil, Brazil's probably, but if you're a net importer of oil, you have to look and see what China's done and said, yeah, you know what? We don't that was pretty good strategic thinking, right? Why do I necessarily always want to be the mark in the market where barrels to you, you're growing barrels to you, right? That kind of is what China was. That's kind of what India is, So anyway, that's my long rambling take on the year.
So there's a lot of threads to pull on there, and I plan to pull on a few of them as we go through this. Let me go here, Thomas. You recently shared on your Substack the following: the underestimated risk of deflation in America. The Fed is still talking about inflation. It should be focused on deflation instead. In your analysis, why is now the time that they should be talking about deflation instead of inflation? What are the risks here, and what are the probabilities of deflation even occurring?
Yeah, so deflation is a clear risk here as well, and that piece came from our strategist Chris Wood, a great writer, and we've been a structural bull on gold and Bitcoin, and so the risks that we see on the deflationary side specifically, right? That one challenge, tariffs play a duality role here, right? Let's look very clearly. If Elon Musk does and Vivek do what they say they're going to do, how's that not deflationary? Right? Department of Efficiency, but at the front end,
won't that cause a lot of pain?
A significant amount of pain.
Yeah,
a significant amount of pain, right? And so And I think
Not that it's not good. Not that cost reduction and efficiency isn't good. I'm for that. I'm just saying, doesn't this need to happen in a very controlled fashion?
Totally. Gary, 100%. And again, it's the right things to do, but it's kind of like, I'm trying to use a good analogy, but it's kind of like a tumor that just kind of builds, right? At the end of the day, you can choose to, change your diet or, exercise and kind of like, but the problem is so far gone. Now you're talking about a full, full removal of the wart, if you will. And
it's a lobotomy here.
Lobotomy, right? A full lobotomy. And let's be frank, like that's not going to be painless. And so, being situated here in Canada, now my partners, the U.S. and Chris is in the U.K. and Asia, where kind of get different views. But I'm talking if Doge catches on in America, Department of Government Efficiency, my God, the reverberations in Canada would be like it just these are the ripple effect will be huge. But and I think the one thing that Elon is incredibly good at is capturing the psyche of a nation, of a people, right? He was, you would never think the guy who actually took subsidies and everything, right, to really build his empire is now the guy championing to tear it all down. Like, but very, he's very astute. And I think that a lot of observers don't see that, how astute he is, and seeing how the winds have changed. And and if we do go this way, it's not just going to be America; it's going to be everyone. And I think it was the president of the EU. I forget her name, but she was out on record saying like these are things in the first Trump term. They were basically treating him as some sort of, this is we'll be done with this in 4 years. Let's not engage with this man. To now, they are seriously reading from the same hymn book as Trump. And that she's like, listen, we're on Russian LNG. We should get off of it and buy your LNG. You're like, damn right. Look, that is actually what should happen. How is that, and so the fact that we're here and people understand, this is not a fluke. This is not an aberration. This is, now that you've won this after, I'll call it an intermission or whatever Biden was, right? Like sleepwalking out of the office, whatever that is. Now you've got, yeah. It's exactly, totally. Did you see him walk into the jungle? Like, what? Like that was just like this kid. Like, why are they even letting him out? Like, this is just sad, right? And he's like, oh yeah. But so now you've got like, if this doesn't say Trump has a mandate, I don't know what does. And more importantly, like he's not playing for another term. He's playing for a legacy. So it's incredible. I think the EU and every other, with the exception of Canada, Trudeau is out to lunch, completely out to lunch. I think everyone appreciates this for what it is. It's a movement. And the reason the movement, it'll spread to other countries is that, people in the UK, people in Germany, people in Canada, they're going to look, why not me? Why is my GDP per capita broken and America is just continues on this ascent?
So do you think that the the G7, which has created so much debt over the last specifically 5 years, but going back decades, do you think they're realizing that maybe they can't get this debt sold as easily as they used to? Yields are rising, and therefore they have no choice but to rein in the size of their deficits in order to stabilize this before it gets out of control?
Yeah. So, and I think there comes a realization, and then there comes the second realization after that you really can't even do that. There's that, your economy is not strong enough, and then then really you look at this and you say, wow, at the same time, you have the proliferation of Bitcoin. And like Bitcoin's going to play a huge role here. And I think a lot of gold bugs really kind of have a deep disdain for Bitcoin. But I think you're going to see right now, Chris Wood wrote about it in the Substack. Very specifically what you have the potential of doing. And this is I forget the exact term that there was a paper written about it, but it's that idea of, if I'm working with funny money, which all of this is, right? What my best strategy is to borrow as much of it and then put it into hard money. Right. So borrow as much of it and put it into Bitcoin, like, which basically results in natural alignment. Right. When people,
it sounds like Gresham's law.
Yeah. It's like you just attack it. And then, so that if you look at it that way, and and the proliferation of Bitcoin to a new generation, right? Like, I'll be honest, like, I don't think we would have got this far with gold as an asset class missed educating a generation, no question. And Bitcoin picked up that slack. So and I think they'll work in a conjoined way.
Okay, so let's stay on the inflation deflation thing for one more moment here. In your analysis, what is the bond market and oil saying about inflation and where it's going?
Yeah, so I think the bond market, clearly, it's one, from our perspective, that's going to be the hardest part the long end's going to be the hardest part to control, right? Like, that's where you're going to get the revolt happening. And I think that just the fact that you've had the Fed cut and the long end just hasn't been obedient, so to speak, is all you need to know, right? And then secondarily, oil, I just almost a differing view is that almost it's telling you kind of like that Doge situation, is the economy isn't that great. It's kind of, so you have this world where it may not come from, and again, I would say that
do you see a scenario where maybe fairly close to the beginning of the term, there's, I don't want to say a forced recession, but almost a forced recession, where the Trump administration could blame it on the Biden administration and then come in under that cover, do their work with Doge and some other things, and then come out much stronger on the other side?
Yeah, so it's a great question, because I've thought about this. Like, what is the impact of really just going hard at cutting costs and all, just really attacking all this? It's by definition deflationary, like all these things. But at the same time, if you do tariffs at the same time, my God, if you decide to take every piece of this, and if you do tariffs at the same time, well, now you're going to cause inflation, right? Like, so it's like, one thing that I always thought, reading Trump, and one of the easiest way, and he's very reflexive, right? Like, he does take the view, if that doesn't work, I'm going to attack the other way. And, and Elon's the king of that, right? Like, if you think about everything that Elon does, he's just like, I'll go hard this one direction, and as soon as I hit a wall, I'm just bouncing off. Whereas if you think about most people and the way they're programmed, they're afraid to admit defeat, and so they'll just keep trying to get through the wall, right? And he'll just attack another way. So to your point, I think they may cut hard and Doge, and as soon as they get the the feeling that, hey, listen, this is causing overdue harm, you kind of you soften the impact, because one thing that is certain, like, if you think about like Trump's previous term, he wants to be loved, and that's that's a part of his persona, right? And the greatest thing about a pure capitalist and wanting to be loved, what if I showed you like a barometer every day? Call it the S&P 500, how much you're loved, right? And so, I think he's going to be acutely aware of the market, right? And and the interplay there. So I don't think he's going to do anything terribly, spill the apple cart heavily. But that all being said, the first term never had anything this revolutionary.
Well, and they don't have a mandate really to go to Washington to do anything with Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. It's more discretionary spending, but there's not a ton there. I mean, everything is baked in the cake. It seems like it's going to be a little challenging to cut. I think it'll be very challenging to cut $2 trillion, but I think it's going to be even a little challenging to get drastic cuts going.
Yeah, and. Well, the one side, is just military spending, right? If the one area of absolute, spending has been you have two wars on two fronts, and if he can.
Well, it's a good thing that when they audit the defense spending, they know exactly where every penny is going.
Right.
Okay, so let's talk about the dollar for a moment here, Thomas. President Trump's influence on the Federal Reserve, it's expected to push for a weaker dollar. At least that's what we saw on the campaign trail with both him and Vance. And that would reverse decades of strong dollar advocacy that goes back to Reagan's time. So the bottom line is, does the dollar have to go down for Trump 2.0 to get his way with his initiatives? And are you anticipating a weaker dollar, beginning in 2025?
I'm not. I'll be. I think he may want a weaker dollar, and he will get a weaker dollar relative to gold and Bitcoin, but he's not going to get it against his trading partners. That's the problem, right? It's like you're unfortunately for Trump, he's the best house in a very, very ugly block.
Yeah. So. The 2000 dot-com bubble saw a decoupling of prices from earnings. That's not happening this time around. Do you see the markets as being in a bubble? And if so, what asset class do you see as being the likeliest to stoke a stock market sell-off?
Yeah, so we definitely don't see a bubble. And I think a lot of casual observers would say, hey, this, I'll show you some Cisco. Let me put the charts on top of each other. But you have to look at earnings. And the one thing that the 2000 bubble had was just price appreciation, no earnings that followed through. Here you've got NVIDIA on 2 years out, just shy of 30 times. That is not nowhere near. And the type of growth that company is going to experience it's going to be nothing short of we're just still in the third inning of this. So I think but again, the dynamic of if you think about the proliferation of the avenues of speculation, very different than the 2000s, right? Here we're the stock market. Well, what if it's not the stock market? What if it's some obscure cryptocurrency? There are so many areas of, speculation that I think that other things could fall for sure. And I still think that, housing as a whole, I still think that could be a challenge too. That could be definitely an area which doesn't see meaningful appreciation for another couple decades.
So if you had to compare, I know there's no exact comparisons, but if you had to compare, would you say the market looks more like the 1995 beginning of that, .com bull market, 1999, where we're approaching the end of it? Or do you even maybe see it more like the roaring 20s, the 1920s, where we've got this runway and just everything's cooking, until maybe an eventual crash?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to present it. So I'll take out the 99. I don't think I don't think that's the scenario. I would say that we are the 95 feels about right, but I have to say that even at that point, computers were a privilege. Really, they really were, right? There are very few people at that time. I still remember my dad getting the first computer. It just wasn't something that was, distributed among the en masse. And that was really so if you think about the revolution in computers, it was productivity, and that was in how many hands it was in, and incredible still. And so it's almost kind of like an image. I would say it's better than 95, and in the sense that the number of people that I know personally that have incorporated AI into their workflow, some aspect of their workflow, and again, this is another headwind for the economy, right? That if you look at it,
you're saying deflationary headwind.
Totally, right? If
Yeah.
you look at it, like anyone I know that's, that's hiring people, et cetera, they are not, they're like, listen, you, sir, sitting at this desk that wants to come in 3 days a week, I want you, before we hire another physical body here, I want you to max out your total new capacity. And I'm sorry, that's not 9 to 5. That's 9 to 5 plus you using AI in a meaningfully dynamic way. And I think that until it's almost like someone took the car that, like, typically, a company reaches it's running at 80, they'll hire 3 more people and, like, continue to grow. Now it's like all of a sudden you've just, like, taken all the, it's just like you're taking all the gas. You're like, hey, listen, we've got so much sales to backfill for the number of people that are sitting on these desks that to your point, that's very deflationary. Like, that to me, it's deflationary, but it's very it's a very exciting opportunity to be invested alongside the technologies. And I know, Gary, you brought it up before we recorded. I just struggle with the dichotomy this new AI world will create, because you're demanding more out of the people that were there. Your sales may be higher, but it's an arms race. It's not just an arms race for Microsoft. It's an arms race for everyday people.
Yeah. And, the reality is, and this is just my opinion, that when a business is faced with an employee with long-term costs, taxes, overhead, insurance, retirement, a bad attitude, sick day, stagnating effort, et cetera, versus AI or robotics, they're going to choose AI and robotics every day of the week. It's going to improve profitability. It's going to eliminate the drag on their balance sheet. There's so many positives here. And so over time, there's going to be a replacement. But the biggest worry that I have is with the explosion of AI and the explosion of robotics, and as it gets better and better and better, as we move through this process that you're talking about, if and when we do hit the next mass unemployment event, because there's never not been a time when we have had one. So I don't know when that's coming, but it'll come eventually, as it does with every cycle. So when it does, and for the first time, we have replacements that don't cost as much, that don't take off work, that don't require healthcare, and don't require an attitude adjustment, and don't require retirement. What is that going to mean for the reentry?
You nailed it. Like, and if you think about just the pathway here, we for the average worker, you're just the labor force, they've taken the worst pathway to AI. If it was a pathway from, let's call it the 90s, early 2000s, where you came in early to the office and you left really late and people felt like that'd be one where you're like, okay, I like Bob. I like, there's a connection there. You've now taken the pathway where we just had COVID. People got too comfortable, don't want to come in. And now you've got this thing that's like, I can do what Bob and Jim do. Like, and I actually want to come in. Like, it's like the compare and contrast now versus the typical worker from, 20 years ago is just so stark. Like, the fact that this came right after COVID, and it's almost like I would even say that you have managers, owners that are so fed up, they actually would rather have 20 AIs. They hate people.
Well, and the improvement that the AIs are experiencing with each new release, it's staggering. That far outpaces the improvement that a typical worker has. They typically stagnate at some point.
For sure. And like that, and it comes back to, well, what's the skill set that someone is going to have in an AI economy, right? And they're going to have to be great prompters. They're going to have to be thinking, right? And, like, let's be frank, the world always worked on 80-20. 80% of the people show up and mail it in. Like, and that just was, we were okay with that, right? I don't think this economy is built for a day where someone comes to the office and says, I can't afford you to be the 80% because there's a robot, there's a tool that does that. I need you to be the 20% that's thinking and like prompting, the results so that we can all be better. And like, if you think about it, like, I still remember the computer, like you would still get seniors who would, like go to like these computer classes and learn a computer. It moved at still a slower rate. This is moving way too fast, way too fast.
I want to point everyone over to our Substack. It's free. Go to metalsandminers.substack.com. We post free content on the consumer, economy, markets, artificial intelligence, individual metals and miners, and every single expert interview, just like this one that we conduct. They're all up there. When you subscribe, we want to give you a free gift. It's a report that we wrote. It's based on the important Ray Dalio foundational premise. It's titled, If You Don't Own Gold, You Know Neither History nor Economics. This free gift is a must-read for everyone on why we all should own gold. So head over to metalsandminers.substack.com, put in your email address to subscribe, and receive the free gift on us. Also, I'm positive that you've enjoyed the conversation with Thomas as much as I have. Please let him know. Hit that like and subscribe button and leave a comment below the video.